I'm Micah Smith with Denver 7, and welcome to Denver Decides. The community partnership is dedicated to accessible and transparent elections. The partnership includes the League of Women Voters of Denver, Interneighborhood Cooperation, and is presented by Denver 8 TV. Before we begin, we would like to extend a special thank you to our hosts for today's events, the Cherry Creek North Neighborhood Association and the 6th Avenue United Church of Christ. Our mission today is to present a ballot issue forum in anticipation of the general election coming up on Tuesday, November 5th. Among the numerous amendment and ordinance questions of this year's ballot is ballot issue number 4A. Now, this measure asks Denver voters if Denver Public Schools should issue $1 million in bonds to repair and maintain 154 DPS buildings, primarily schools. So let's begin by meeting the participants who will discuss the pros and cons of ballot issue 4A. Beginning at my right is Albus Brooks, former City Council President and currently the chair of DPS's Community Planning and Advisory Committee. He will be speaking in favor of ballot issue 4A. And on my left is Kim Monson, the president of the Colorado Union of Taxpayers, and she will be speaking in opposition to ballot issue 4A. Let's welcome both of our speakers. We will begin with 1-minute opening statements from both speakers. Mr. Brooks, you are up first, speaking for ballot issue 4A.
Thank you. For the first 5 months of this year, I was one of the 6 co-chairs with more than 70 community leaders who worked with Denver Public Schools to put forth 4A proposal on the November ballot. This package includes $975 million worth of essential DPS needs, including air conditioning in every school. 4A will not raise your taxes. 4A will not raise your taxes and save millions in taxpayer dollars by lengthening the useful life of the existing buildings. If 4A fails, DPS will be forced to pay for facility improvements with funds that would otherwise go to attracting and retaining quality teachers and improving classroom instruction. Learning environments are essential. And if we learned anything during COVID, we need learning environments matter, and we need to invest in them at the highest rate possible.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. And now opening statement from Kim Monson speaking against ballot issue 4A.
Thank you, Micah. This year's ballot will be long, complicated, and confusing. It's important that voters are informed about the issues and how these issues personally affect them. Denverites are hurting from high government-induced inflation and high property taxes. I am concerned that continual extensions and increases in property taxes will tax people out of their homes and require continual rent increases for renters. Higher property taxes make housing less affordable. It's a vicious cycle. Higher taxes, less affordability. A majority of Denverites' taxes go to Denver Public Schools. Property taxes for Denverites increased anywhere from 20 to 40% plus or more over the last couple of years, creating a windfall of taxes for these taxing entities. Even with this windfall, Denver Public Schools is asking Denverites to take on an additional $1 billion in debt with an estimated repayment cost of $1.9 billion. This during a time when DPS is closing schools, facing declining enrollment, and predicting another 8% decline in enrollment by 2028.
Thank you, Ms. Monson. Now we've heard opening statements from both of you, so now Mr. Brooks, you have an opportunity to ask Ms. Monson a question, and Kim, you will have 30 seconds to answer. Albus, your question.
Thank you. In the past, your podcast has been sponsored by the Christian Home Educators of Colorado, who have testified that public schools and compulsory student attendance were created to indoctrinate children. Do you believe we should move away from taxpayer-funded public schools altogether?
It's a good question. I think that taxpayers want results. I just recently had gotten a report from Chalkbeat, and it said the CMAS scores in 2024 for Denver Public Schools for third graders who met or exceeded grade level expectation in language arts was only 40.7%. and only 31.2% in math. So when we are letting kids down like that, because they need these critical skills to be able to be successful in life, we need to really take a look at when we're asked to pay more in taxes.
And now, Ms. Monson, your turn to ask Mr. Brooks a question, and Albus, you'll have 30 seconds to reply.
Mr. Brooks, it seems that the ballot language on question 4A is contrived and disingenuous. Extending taxes that would have gone away is actually a tax increase. 4A begins without imposing any new tax. But how can an entity issue almost $1 billion in debt with a total estimated repayment cost of $1.9 billion and pay that back without extending any existing taxes?
Thanks for the question. As you know, our ballot language is legally put together, so there was nothing that's being contrived. Secondly, our tax rate will not increase. We will not be increasing any taxes at all. And so, and third, what I'm most excited about, once this passes, we put together a bond oversight committee to ensure that we are legally responsible for all the promises and commitments that this bond put forward.
Let's continue with the direct questions from our speakers. And Ms. Monson, another question for Mr. Brooks. And as before, you'll have 30 seconds to reply.
Okay. What happened to the 20 to 40% plus windfall of tax revenue that was generated by the recent property reassessments after the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment?
Well, if you want to get into details of operations at DPS, I'm excited to kind of talk about that. I think moving towards the future, we have over 200 buildings in DPS that are aging and really struggling. And so what we find is that they're in critical repair right now. And if we do not, in this bond, most of this bond is put towards deferred maintenance. If we do not address these things, our kids they're in trouble. And if we don't do it right away, it will go into our operations
Thank you,
budgets
Mr.
and
Brooks.
come out of what our kids are doing.
And now, Mr. Brooks, another question for Ms. Monson. And Ms. Monson, you will have 30 seconds for your response.
I believe, Ms. Monson, air conditioning is important. I'm sure that as in learning environments, it's important that our kids are in an environment where we have air conditions and they're safe. Do you have air conditioning in your home?
I do, and I wish they had air conditioning in this church right now. It's a little warm. Was that your question?
That's my question.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we will move on to our next few rounds.
Could I then expound upon that?
I would need, you can't. You have 22 seconds.
Yes, I do have air conditioning in my home, and I agree with you that there are some things in this bond question that do make some sense. However, I'm wondering, I'm going to date myself, but when I was a kid, we went to school from Labor Day to Memorial Day most years, and those were cooler years. Having kids go to school at the beginning or middle of August, which is one of our hottest months, doesn't make a lot of sense. So certainly air conditioning is a good idea. That's one thing in this bond question that makes sense, but I don't think that the big, huge package
Thank you,
should be
Ms.
approved.
Monson. Okay, now we will move on to questions submitted from our four organizers. Each speaker will each have a chance to answer the question, and they will have 30 seconds to do so. So Albert Brooks, who is here speaking in support of ballot issue 4A, you will answer the first. If this bond is not approved by voters, what is the next best way to pay for these school improvements?
Well, unfortunately, we do not have a next best way. As I said before, we have over 200 buildings with an average age of 50 years. And so we have had a third party come and assess each of the buildings, and they're in critical maintenance. And if this bond does not pass, we will have to go into our operational dollars to pay for all of this, which goes into our learning environments and also teacher education.
And now, Kim Monson, your response to that question.
Have the question again?
If this bond is not approved by voters, what is the next best way to pay for these school improvements?
I think that it's time that governmental entities pull up their sleeves, look under the couch cushions, and see what can be done. With DPS actually closing schools, what is going to be done with those schools? Perhaps they could be sold and create revenue to then refurbish some of these other schools. So what is occurring with that?
And our next question from our organizers for our guests. Ms. Monson, you will respond first, and you'll have 30 seconds to answer. Will Denver property owners pay an increased amount of taxes for these bonds?
My understanding is what will happen is that there are bond questions that will have been approved by Denver voters, and those bonds will be extended. So when Mr. Brooks says that without raising property taxes, if your property taxes were going to go down, but yet now they're still just going to be extended, granted, that's the same amount from here to there, but it is a tax increase from what would happen if those bonds were paid off. And so it's a bit disingenuous to say that without increasing taxes, because in essence, it's an extension of taxes.
Thank you, Kim. And now, Mr. Brooks, your response to that question.
No. No, but in all honesty, I've answered this question before. The tax rate is not increasing. The tax rate is staying the same, and so that's why legally, we are not increasing taxes can be put on the ballot language so that we're very clear with our voters.
Our final round of submitted questions from the forum organizers, and Albus, you'll be first to respond to this question. You'll have 30 seconds. What impact on the need for this bond issue will the district's declining enrollment and likely school closures be?
Say that again, what the impact?
What impact on the need for this bond issue will the district's declining enrollment and likely school closures be?
You know, this is an interesting question, and I feel like I have three kids in DPS, and we are projecting that enrollment is coming up, but we also see a huge increase in the north part of Denver, and that's where we're investing a lot of these dollars. And so I believe we have used a lot of data to really guide us in this process, a lot of community input, and we feel like this is exactly what needs to happen.
And now, Kim, your response to that question.
One more time, make it please.
What impact on the need for this bond issue will the district's declining enrollment and likely school closures be?
Well, I would say that that's a very good question and that it needs to be addressed.
That your answer? All right. On behalf of the forum organizers, we'd like to thank both of you for your participation in this forum. We hope we have given you a fair look at the pro and con arguments for ballot issue 4A. Again, it asks voters if the Denver Public Schools should issue $975 million to repair and maintain 154 DPS buildings, primarily schools. Our thanks also to the Denver Decides partners, which include Inter-Neighborhood Cooperation and the League of Women Voters. Denver Decides is presented by Denver 8 TV. We would like to extend a special thank you to our hosts for today's event, the Cherry Creek North Neighborhood Association, and the 6th Avenue United Church of Christ. Remember, Election Day is Tuesday, November 5th. Let your voice be heard, be sure you are registered, and be sure to vote. For complete election information online, go to denverdecides.org. I'm Micah Smith with Denver 7. Thanks for joining us.